Today on the Transplant Helper, we're going to be attempting to answer that age-old question, is it better for us to be taking the name brand or the generic form of any given drug? Actually, I think we can shed a little bit of light on the subject, so go ahead and stay tuned. Hey folks, welcome to the Transplant Helper. Today, my name is Jim Merle. As I said just a moment ago, yes, today we're trying to talk about, shed a little light on this subject. Is it better for us to be taking the name brand or the generic form of any drug? Now, you obviously understand in this subject, there are going to be varied opinions out there. As a matter of fact, in my research, I've found that many physicians and or pharmacists do not even agree on this subject. So in general, why should we as the patients agree either? And that's okay. You have your own opinion, I have mine, but in the essence and the end of this, hopefully today, what I'm going to be stating is based on fact, not fiction. So I hope you'll stay tuned to the end to hear the entire discussion here, because I'll be honest with you, I'm not really leaning one way or the other. I just want to make an argument for each and to make that argument in a fair way. So with that said, let's start out by thinking about it, considering why the name brand drugs cost so much more than their generic equivalents. And that's basically because it's the name brand company, the original companies that have put in all the time and the research and the studies to develop those drugs. If they've not done that themselves, at least they've hired someone on the outside to do that for them. So they spent all the money, they put all the cost into developing those drugs. Therefore, once they in turn, what they typically do when they file those patents, when they file those applications with the FDA, they generally are able to lock in a certain time frame, a number of years or months or whatever, through which they're going to be able to exclusively sell those drugs. And by doing anything exclusively, they can actually set the price, they can set the market, and therefore they can charge you pretty much as they want to. And that's unfortunate for us, but for them, it's a matter of trying to recover some of their costs. Now, what happens when their patents run out and when their agreement with the FDA begins to run out, when that application runs out, then other companies, no matter who they are, can then step in and start making what is known as a generic equivalent of that drug. And the word equivalent is very important in this discussion, but basically they then in turn can file with the FDA, ask permission to make those generic equivalents, and if they meet certain criteria, they are now given permission to do so. And remember, because they've not done all the original research, all the original studies and such, they already can give you a cost savings up front, because now you're only paying for the manufacturing of that drug, not necessarily all of the development. But here's what has to be done, and this is why I think we should really be clear as to whether or not those generics are really inferior to the original drug. And that is, when these generics are applying for the applications with the FDA, they have to meet certain high standards, the same high standards, by the way, that original company had to meet. And particularly in two areas, they have to prove something before they can just go out and start manufacturing these drugs. And number one, they have to prove that they have in their possession a pharmaceutical equivalent. I said equivalent would be a key word, but a pharmaceutical equivalent to that drug before they can start manufacturing it. And what I mean by a pharmaceutical equivalent is that what they've got to prove here is that it's basically the same drug with the same strength and taken by the same route. In most cases, taken by mouth, taken orally. Of course, other drugs are out there that are taken intravenously, whatever, but in what we take every day, oral medicine. So they have to prove that in the pharmaceutical equivalents before they can even start to manufacture a drug. In addition to that, they also have to prove, and this is a big key, that it is likewise a biological equivalent to that original drug. And by a biological equivalent, what's being meant there is they have to prove that it has the same action or effectiveness that the original drug had in the same amount of time. And so they can't say, well, our drug is just as effective. You pop our pill and it'll start working in 8 hours, when the original drug started working and was absorbed in the body in, say, 30 minutes. They actually have to parallel those two things. They have to show that it has the same effective action as well as have to prove it has been done in the same or very similar amount of time. So because of those two things, the pharmaceutical equivalency and also the biological equivalency, basically they have to do an awful lot to prove that they're the same drug. And so from that perspective, if you just stop the discussion right there, then you would assume the FDA in their criteria have made that pharmaceutical company, which happens to be generic, prove that they're the same thing as the name brand anyway. So why should we see any difference? Well, the differences do not come in the active ingredients. The active ingredients must have all met those parallel equivalents. However, where the differences oftentimes come in is what we would call as laymen as the inactive ingredients. In the pharmaceutical world, they would call that the acceptance. The acceptance are basically the inactive ingredients, or we might call them the fillers that are put in beside that medicine that can either improve or take away from its effectiveness or altogether make it react in our body much differently. Now, here's the case, and let me just give you one example. Let's say that you're taking a 5 milligram pill. Doesn't matter what it is. In my case, that might be a 5 milligram Prograf or tacrolimus, the generic form of that. Say I'm taking a 5 milligram pill. Do you realize how small 5 milligrams would be if it had no filler, no acceptance in it at all? That would basically be the equivalent of about 5 grains, if you will. A milligram would be about 5 grains of, say, kosher salt, okay? Not very much. And so it would be almost impossible to manufacture a pill so tiny, so minute, to where in 5 milligrams we could just pop the pill and swallow it. No, that wouldn't even be possible or even logical. So what they in turn are able to do and do is that they put a lot of these acceptance in there, or the fillers that give it the bulk, the size. If you take your 5 milligram pill, whatever it is, and you were to weigh it on an accurate scale, you'd find out it's much larger than 5 milligrams. It may weigh 1,500 milligrams. There's only 5 milligrams of active ingredient. Of course, you can pick up a medicine bottle and see some of this sometimes, even on a bottle of Tylenol. You can see the inactive ingredients far or lesser weight than the active ingredients. And so it's because of these fillers. Now, it's not the fact that they have fillers. I mean, all that other stuff just dissolves in your body. It's inactive. It doesn't do anything. It doesn't change anything. Unless the fillers that they use themselves affect the absorption of that medicine. Now, here's where the differences come in. Here's where you have someone that says, well, I was on Prograf and I did perfectly fine, no problem. And then they put me on the generic or tacrolimus, and now I have all kind of problem. I can't keep my levels going right. I can't get anything to go right. And that could apply for any medication. But anyway, that's where someone starts to argue. And it's because one company might use one filler while another company uses a different filler. And depending on you as an individual patient, everybody being different, that medication may be absorbed better or not as good in your body, or faster or slower in your body, if you will, than the previous medication you were on. Now, again, most people do just as well one for the other, no matter what the drug is. But there are some of us who are more sensitive, who have a little bit more difficulty with that, and it can cause a real problem. So it's not the active ingredients that are different. The FDA's held them up to the same standards there, set the bar high, hopefully high enough. But it's the inactive ingredients, or these expectorants, that are added to that really can cause a problem. So in making your choice whether or not to take the name brand or generic, obviously cost is probably going to be the first deciding factor in that. Second to that, I would say it would be based on your doctor's recommendation. What does your doctor think about this? And then thirdly, you would just really have to see how it works. Give yourself a chance on one or the other. Use a clear, open mind when you go into either one or the other, and really see if it's working for you, see if the blood work, the testing can prove that in the end. So at the end of the day, ask your doctor, make your own decision on this, form your own opinion, and take what works for you. But I think the facts still stand the same. these generic companies had to meet with those same pharmaceutical and these biological equivalents in order to come to market. I appreciate you joining me today. If this program has helped you out in some way at all, go ahead and give me a big thumbs up, like this program, share it out with your friends and family members who might benefit, and consider subscribing today by hitting that button beneath the video and maybe even the bell notification all beside that so you can be notified every time I put out content, which hopefully will advocate, educate, and motivate you as a transplant patient. Thank you again for joining me today. Until next time, stay stronger, friends. Hey, hold up, wait a minute. I'm here editing the video now, and I've noticed over and over again when I was referring to those inactive ingredients, I kept referring to it as expectorants. I don't know what that's about. Anyway, the actual word is excipients, and I apologize for that. But anyway, we all learned a new word today. Thanks.